everybody, to the Breathing Deeply Yoga Therapy and Meditation podcast. My name is Joe Simek. I'm part of the faculty of Breathing Deeply. I'm here with director and lead teacher Brandt Passalacqua. And today we are talking not just about meditation and yoga therapy, we're talking about meditation in the context of yoga therapy. So, in other words, that's how does a yoga therapist use meditation with their clients? So, lots to talk about today. Pretty interesting conversation when you dig into what a yoga therapist really does in session. But I thought today we would start with how a yoga therapist who uses meditation is different than a meditation teacher, right? How is a yoga therapist approaching things differently than somebody who just teaches meditation? Why is that important?
It's funny because so many people get so much benefit from learning meditation that you might not even think of that. If you're kind of like, oh, who should I go to learn meditation? I'm struggling in some way. But, I think that, the biggest distinction is like that a yoga therapist thinks about teaching somebody meditation in terms of how that meditation is going to affect that person. And probably more importantly, the symptoms or pathology, right, that they're experiencing. And meditation teachers teach usually in a lineage, right? We teach a meditation system, and that system is usually designed to progress us spiritually, or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it's to like make us feel more grounded and present, or even to become enlightened. But of course, the system wasn't designed to help with our autoimmune disease or help us if we're in treatment for cancer or have chronic pain. So they're definitely different things and different approaches.
Yeah, it's not uncommon for me to work with a new student or a new client, and they'll have I'll ask, do you have experience with meditation? And they'll have experience doing one very specific type of meditation that they've done for a really long time. So essentially what you're saying is that there's more than one way to approach meditation. Like sometimes people learn one way and that's what they think meditation is.
Yeah. And, just like all things yoga. So in yoga, right, we have asana and breathing, and chanting and philosophy and meditation. Us yoga therapists are interested in like, how do we use these for your like current issue that you've come for? And it's funny, right? Because when you say that about like asana, it makes total sense to people. They go, oh, okay, sure, right. Like, I have an injured hip, and of course I'm going to do physical movement slightly different, maybe than somebody who doesn't have an injured hip, or you're going to give me very specific things for that injured hip. But I've definitely encountered speaking with people about this when they say, oh, I'm going to give you specific meditations that were most likely to help you with your pathology. Let's say that's like chronic pain. They kind of look at you like, what do you mean? There's only one way to meditate. I mean, you sit down, you be real quiet, and then something happens, right? They're like, no, there's actually a lot of meditation techniques. I mean, really, thousands in the world. Yeah. So I don't think it occurs to everyone. So it's kind of been an interesting subject for me, for sure, to look at over the years.
So I can hear somebody, or think of somebody listening to this podcast. Maybe they're a yoga teacher. Maybe they mostly work with movement. And they're thinking to themselves, okay, meditation for chronic pain. How, maybe I'm a little, maybe I'm not quite sure that matches up, right? So is there, do we have research? Do we have, what do yoga therapists use as proof that this is something that we should consider as people who work, as healers, or people who work as PTs or things like that?
Yeah. And it's such an interesting thing, like when you think about the research, because with all this stuff, like, yes, there is research. Is the research amazing? Not really, not yet. Mm-hmm. And, just so anyone listening to this is clear, I mean, that's really because there hasn't been a lot of interest in spending, $50 million studying every type of meditation for every single pathology. So what we have is studies that have been conducted. A lot of the good ones, actually, TM has done some interesting studies. The mindfulness kind of Buddhist community around that has done some really great studies over the years. So we have like actual scientific evidence that meditation helps with certain things. Chronic pain would be one of them. But what we don't have is comparisons. So, we don't have, does mindfulness, if mindfulness meditation for 12 weeks reduces chronic pain, right? And people who have had surgery, something like that, does a pranic awareness technique meditation, does chanting, does mantra, there's so many different meditations. So we don't have that data. So, but what we do have is the large amounts of anecdotal experience, at least within our school, right? So we train people in basically 3 different frameworks. And we kind of tweak those frameworks as we get more and more data, from people actually using them. So in our school, those frameworks, we use Ayurvedic frameworks of the doshas and koshas, and we have another framework that's something I developed called mind types. And so we use these frameworks to assign the meditations that are like most likely going to help people. And that goes pretty well. I mean, and as soon as someone gives us $5 to $10 million, we will prove it out scientifically beyond a reasonable doubt. But I don't think that's happening today.
Consider it done. Awesome. Well, so just to dig into the assessment a little bit, you're talking about these Ayurvedic tools, you're talking about these mind types. So just from a nuts and bolts perspective, somebody comes into your office, you're assessing them in real time. You're figuring out based on what condition they're coming to you with, what you're seeing from them as a person, their experience with meditation, and then you're moving in the direction of the quote unquote correct meditation based on what you're seeing in these sessions with people.
Yeah, it's a combination of that, like this sort of very individualized approach, which I think is like the hallmark of yoga therapy, where we look at the whole person. We use frameworks that look at the entire person so that we can, assign techniques that are going to work best for them. And research-backed tools, that we've seen work before. So, if you come in with something where, like me personally working, someone might come in and I might identify them as a certain doshic type, which is an Ayurvedic framework. I might also identify them as a certain mind type, which is a different framework. And I might also hear that they are struggling, let's say, with chronic pain. And I have, been privy to research on people meditating for chronic pain and the protocols they used. So it leaves me as a yoga therapist with a few different ways to go in terms of assigning that meditation, which is super helpful. Because as because you work as a yoga therapist, you kind of do your best guess based on all the information you have for the individual. But, I might start with the protocol, the sort of mindfulness-based stress reduction based protocol that has like body scans in it because we've seen that work and there's good research on it. And then we do that and the person's chronic pain doesn't shift, right? So then we might flip into a different framework and use a different sort of type of meditation for that person. Back to the original question, if you went to a meditation teacher, you might get, well, here's how you would meditate right now, which is fine. But from a yoga therapist point of view, we would say, no, let's work in these other areas of your being first. For sure. And as a yoga therapist, we also might say, sounds like you also need some counseling, right? Like we might also have other suggestions, in terms of referrals and things. So a little different from a meditation teacher that way.
What would you want to tell somebody that is compelling from a condition perspective? Like where can meditation really work?
Well, I think there's a lot of places actually. Pain is definitely like a sort of popular thing people are seeking help for. I think fatigue and low energy and conditions that contribute to that are really interesting. And we have a sort of a framework to work with those kinds of things that are sort of different than with pain. It might be nice to give a, before I go on with that, like an example of the way we might think about something. So a yoga therapist might think, um, for real long-term chronic pain, I might think about meditations that really expand awareness and allow the mind, right, to take in multiple inputs at the same time. So I might be helping someone meditate in a way that's going to stop the mind from sort of obsessing and getting better at feeling pain. So it's not that it totally takes the pain away, but it can reduce it in that way. Versus somebody with an autoimmune disease, where we would probably work with a set of meditations designed to, as quickly as possible, alter brainwave states, so that um, the person has more sort of healing, basically brainwave states that everyone has, and you mostly kind of produce them during sleep. And there's certain techniques that would make it more likely for your brain to start kind of producing those brain waves during your waking states, therefore like speeding up healing. So those are like two examples. And then other things where you see really good efficacy is, there's great research on people with cancer. It's kind of an easier place to research because it's easy to find people who are in cancer treatment altogether. And there's been some really good stuff on that. And there's been good stuff on surgery, meditations and contemplations where people have positive affirmations and imagine things coming out well and kind of create a positive mind state in the mind. People actually have better outcomes post surgery, which is super interesting. So that would be a very different kind of meditation set than the chronic pain or the autoimmune example I gave. So, if you look at those three things, they're all very different. So anyone who is sort of saying, well, meditation's good for you, like just do this one meditation. This is my lineage. They're a little off in this way. They don't have enough kind of information and techniques to work with because people are dealing with different things.
Somebody listening who wants these tools, where do they start with breathing deeply?
Well, if they wanted to come train with us, we have a yoga therapy school, and you can go to breathingdeeply.com. We have a smaller program called the Foundations Program where we get into this. And then we have a larger program, our advanced program, where we have more very specific modules, which includes these things. And then people do all sorts of stuff in between. We have modules people sort of tack on to their programs to be able to work with meditation. We also have like a separate program that's a meditation teacher training. And so if you were just interested in meditation, that might be of interest. And that meditation teaching is more like a lineage, except we also have a whole module just on, mind types and using different meditations for different conditions. So there's a lot of ways within our school that you could interact with that. And I would encourage anyone that's like interested in this kind of stuff to, of course, we want you to contact us. But if you really start like researching, meditation from a yoga therapy perspective, you're going to have a very different viewpoint. And, I'm pretty sure, I can't say this for 100%, but I haven't encountered another group or school yet that does it the way we do. So that's kind of interesting. Most of them have like some pretty set protocols as opposed to these larger frameworks. I'm not privy to every school's curriculum, but that's my impression. So it's kind of an interesting thing. I would say that using meditations for medical conditions is definitely pretty cutting edge in terms of what people are doing.
Yeah, it's a fascinating conversation because I think it is so new. And what we see just anecdotally, it's so useful. So conversation continues as we move forward. It's good to see you, Brandt. Thanks so
Well,
much.
great to see you, Joe. Thanks so much for the conversation.